Assistant Minister, in accordance with Standing Order 193, the time for members' constituency statements has concluded, and I call the clerk.
Government business. Order of the day number 1, Regulatory Reform Omnibus Bill 2026, resumption of debate on the second reading.
The question is that the bill now be read a second time, and I call the member for Wentworth.
Deputy Speaker, I rise in support of this bill, but also to urge the government to go further on it. This government, I welcome the fact that this government recognises that regulatory burden and unnecessary regulatory burden hampers the dynamism of our economy. And from a productivity point of view, we know that we need to make change here. And we also know that if we don't improve productivity, we do not improve real wages, we do not improve the lives and the prosperity of Australians. So I welcome the government's work in this space, and I welcome the government's bill in this space, and I welcome other actions the government has taken, including the EPBC reform and moves things such as to pause the Housing Construction Code. However, I do think the government needs to go further, and on this basis I'm going to be moving a second reader to this. I seek leave to move a second reading speech, second reader amendment on the Regulatory Reform Omnibus Bill, because I think that there is real significant further that we need to go. So let me tell you why. The cost of complying with Commonwealth regulation is growing. It was estimated as $65 billion in 2013. It is estimated at $160 billion today. The time that boards spend on risk and compliance has gone from 24% in 2015 to 55% in 2025. In Brisbane, it takes 31 separate approvals to open a cafe. Medical researchers who I speak to are spending up to a quarter of their time writing grant applications rather than engaging in medical research. I've seen firsthand how drone technology is on the forefront of some of these problems because government is slow to make decisions. There's no accountability of many government departments in terms of the speed of its decision-making. And so when I have spoken to innovative drone companies that we should be trying to support and grow in this country, they're telling me they cannot compete with things like helicopter companies or anything because they have no certainty about how long it will take for the government or the regulator, CASA in this case, to actually make an approval of their applications. They have no certainty, and this is something I hear time and time again. I have the ATO speak to businesses looking for foreign investment, and they're saying they're waiting up to 18 months for the ATO to make a decision on how an investment would be treated, and so the foreign capital just goes away. We need to change the culture here, and this is why, while I support this government's actions in this space, I urge the government to go further. Because this isn't about bad people. There are many, many good people both in this House and actually across Australian government departments and regulators, people who want the best for the Australian people. But it's actually structural. The problem is structural. The system rewards visible new action, more rules, more money, more strategy, and almost never rewards the quiet, harder work of removing what is unnecessary, which doesn't create value and which is not making the difference that it intended to. The Productivity Commissioner recently wrote a recent article making the same point, that every new problem gets a patch rather than a rewrite, and the patches on top of each other are making Australia's regulatory burden extremely high and making Australia a less attractive place to start and grow and invest in, which is a problem for all Australians. And the truth is that governments and regulators are monopolies. And we know that in market terms, market disciplines firms through exit, but you cannot exit. We have no choices. We have no choice to exit regulators. We have no choice to exit governments. And what we end up is, the costs of monopoly, of governments being monopoly, are borne by people. So, I support this bill, as I said. The bill is useful, it is technical, it's incremental, it has useful schedules, it has a tell us once, it has streamlining, it has technical fixes. These are all good things, and I do not underestimate the effort that goes into getting useful changes like this. But it is the second bill in a year. and we still have the cost curve climbing regardless. And nothing in this bill, nor in any of the bills that we've had to date, fundamentally changes the incentives around regulatory burden, fundamentally changes the incentives either in this place amongst the politicians or in the regulators or in the departments. And that is where I think the government needs to go. And so my second reader amendment, which I'm moving now, is trying to put forward ideas that would actually move the dial, to introduce crude but measurable regulatory reduction targets and strategies, that every new regulatory burden is matched by removal elsewhere. The same discipline already applied to budget spending proposals. We need to change the culture and incentives by making senior public servants and responsible ministers directly accountable for right-sizing regulation. And this right-sizing regulation should be an explicit KPI. Dynamism should be a measured, accountable consideration for major regulators, not just risk avoidance. New regulatory instruments should include sunset clauses, and the Office of Impact Assessment should have greater independence, such as that regulatory impact is actually evaluated, not just box-ticked. And finally, I urge the government to expand the National Productivity Fund. I support the government's work on the National Productivity Fund, but I think it's currently around 1/10 of the size of the original 1990s National Competition Fund. And so if we expect that to move the dial as it did back in the 1990s, we are actually going to have to put more firepower behind it. So that is why I'm moving the second reader amendment standing my name, not to block this bill, but to put on record that admiring the problem for the third or fourth year running is not a strategy. We need these changes. We need senior accountability. We need the government to, I think, further embrace what it has identified as real problems, but start to change the incentives as well as build on the significant and, I think, useful work that the government has already done. Thank you.
I thank the member.